I'm joined by Sophie Mokoena, the international news editor of SABC in South Africa, Johannesburg. You are very welcome, Sophie.
Thank you so much.
Well, she joined me in this exclusive interview, which happened right after this extraordinary summit of the heads of state and government of the SADC, which approved some of the resolutions which mainly reiterated on these security issues in DRC. Sophie, without going far, there is the resolution number 12, which stated that on the termination of the SAMIDRC mission in DRC, and they also called the commencement of its withdrawal. What does this mean in this path of finding the lasting solution in Eastern DRC?
Well, I think people have been asking questions in terms of when the troops were deployed, the intention was going to give support to the government of the DRC. And now that the eastern part of the DRC is under control of M23 group, why are we still having the contained, and they are perhaps in the base, they are not doing anything, and they at times struggle to get supply, because you know that the relationship wouldn't be as good as it should be in terms of these people were fighting and they were not on the same side, and therefore the moment has arrived for the SADC region to withdraw its troops. But also you want to demonstrate that as SADC, you are not taking side and you are listening to different voices, with the hope that those who were pushing for the withdrawal will also do their part to ensure that they demonstrate commitment to the peace process and finding lasting solutions to the current problem in the eastern part of the DRC.
Well, this happened right after a month after the joint EAC SADC summit. Should we see this as a result of this summit? This was one of the requests that was made by the heads of state?
Yes, I think it's the implementation of the agreements reached in Tanzania. And you'd recall there was a decision to give the generals to go and look at how you deal with those proposals that were on the table. And I think it's part of the implementation of the EAC SADC meeting, with the hope that this will lead to more implementation of the agreements, so that you are able to finally arrive at a situation where all stakeholders, all those who are affected, are on the table or sitting at the table discussing a lasting solution to the current problem in the DRC.
Well, this even happened a few hours after the mediator, Angola, announced the dates of this peace dialogue between the AFC/M23 and the DRC government. Does this brings us to the pure understanding that the DRC is now understanding that the peace process is viable and should be reliable instead of military solution?
It's like dragging someone to an altar. I think that's how I will describe it. There was no option for the government of the DRC, because you can see that the M23 is advancing, and those forces that were supposed to help them are now in the barracks or in the bases, and they can't help them. Therefore, there are no options. We heard that there was an attempt to get the Americans involved. We saw some allegations that now they are approaching India. And I think all these countries are going to say this is an African solution and it needs it's an African problem that needs an African solution. So they will be sent back to the regions, EAC and SADC. And I think there are no other options for the DRC. I think the government of President Tshisekedi has accepted that they will have to find a way to resolve this issue amicably, but it wasn't easy. I think it took a lot of convincing and negotiations by the chair of the African Union right now, the president of Angola, who is also a member of the SADC. And therefore, I think even different countries behind the scenes had to call President Tshisekedi to persuade him to understand that the only solution is a peace process, and therefore today they were calling for cessation of hostilities and a ceasefire.
Which the DRC didn't comply with.
Yes, stakeholders didn't comply with. Many of those who are involved in this situation didn't comply. And therefore, I think this time around, we are watching whether the DRC government and the M23 and others will be talking, and when they finally agree on cessation of hostilities and ceasefire, will they comply? And unfortunately, with ceasefire, someone has to enforce the ceasefire. We don't know who will take the responsibility of enforcement. And sometimes you have to enforce ceasefire by having a standby force. And I can't see that happening, particularly after the withdrawal of the SAMIDRC.
Then, do you think this can put an end to this blame game the DRC have been playing for a very long time, of always putting the blame on Rwanda and requesting sanctions?
I don't think so. I think DRC will continue to point out for them what is the cause. And I think it will continue. It's not going to stop. But what is important is cessation of hostilities and ceasefire so that fighting can stop and you don't continue with loss of life. The blame game, you know, people will do it in any situation. And I can't see him taking a decision now to say, no, I'm not going to blame anybody. I will accept that as a leader, I should have done something right. I remember I spoke to him when he was contesting elections for the first time. He had given assurance that he was going to unite the people of Congo, DRC, but it didn't happen. And I remember at some point in time, the very same M23 had thrown its weight behind his candidature. And later, after 1 year, 9 months, there was a fallout, and here we are.
Well, before concluding, what's the way forward? After all these resolutions of this extraordinary summit of the SADC heads of state and the governments, as well as the even other meetings that happened ever before this one?
I think all stakeholders must return back to dusting off a document that was signed at Sun City in South Africa some many years ago. That would have included President Paul Kagame and the then president of the DRC, Joseph Kabila, and other forces to go and implement the decisions that were taken there. If that document can be implemented, the resolution thereof or the recommendations, I think we will see a situation where the DRC is better off. It will still experience challenges because the challenges of the DRC now are too deep, and you have interest parties, not only on the continent, outside the continent as well. But I think the implementation of the Sun City document that had pointed out that the DRC government will not allow the rebel movement or people who fled during the genocide in Rwanda to continue to launch attacks into Rwanda. But secondly, if you don't bring all parties on the table, you are not going to find a lasting solution. If you exclude certain groups, those groups will regroup and they'll recruit and will continue to have instability in the DRC. And therefore, at the end of the day, the Congolese themselves must sit and discuss this problem and find a lasting solution. And they must accept that they are all Congolese.
In 1 minute, what is your anticipation on this upcoming peace dialogue between the M23 and DRC government?
Very difficult. I can't see immediately an agreement. I think it will take time because both parties are going to put on the table some demands. Some of the demands are going to be dismissed by both sides. And therefore, I can't see an immediate agreement. But these kinds of engagements are bringing hope that at some point in time, they will find one another.
Thank you so much, Sophie, for having this time with us.
Thank you.